Richard Peake of Merchant Gourmet. Welcome to Brand Growth Heroes. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. And thanks so much for having me on. I'm humbled to be here because I listen a lot to the pods. I think it's a really good source of information for people in our industry. So yeah, great to be on. Very good.
Thank you so much. And we're really surprised that we haven't crossed paths over the years because we have really similar backgrounds. Me on the graduate scheme in Nestle many years ago, and you, excuse me, on the graduate scheme in Mars, and then both went on to do different things. But the reason we thought it would be fascinating to have a chat today is because you joined Merchant Gourmet, a heritage brand that we all know and love in the UK. And we've seen loads and loads of innovation coming out of Merchant Gourmet in the last year, 2 years in particular. And you joined them 4 years ago. And at that point, they were at 15 million in sales. And since
Correct,
then, since then, you and the team have doubled the business to 30 million. And we thought it would be brilliant to kind of deconstruct that and ask the question, what does it take when it's time for founders to potentially stand back and let somebody else take over and do things differently? What are the things that somebody has to look at in order to drive that next stage of growth? So thank you you're probably one of the very first non-founder guests we've had on the show. So thanks for coming on.
No, I'm very conscious of that. I love listening to the founder stories, so I feel like I've got a bit of imposter syndrome already.
No, I think it's really important, because I think it's really important. And I know there's a few podcasts coming out recently, have just come out recently, which focus on the people who are not the founder. And I think Mitch Lee has got one, and that's really worth doing because, it's often the senior teams who are doing a lot of the work. So I think we need much more of a spotlight on people like you. So look, take us back a little bit to, where your career started and what kind of roles you were in so that we can appreciate a little bit what your experiences and capabilities and skill sets were that you're bringing to the party when Merchant Gourmet was at 15 million. After, 20 years it took them to get there, yeah?
Yeah, 25, yeah.
25, okay.
Exactly. Yeah. No, good question. So I mean, I've always been in consumer goods. So I started my career at Mars Chocolate, was on the graduate scheme there, which was great. Really, really enjoyed it. And I kind of just worked my way through Mars for years, actually. I think I was there 8.5 years, in various roles, all on the demand side of the business. So I was in category, so I was in category management, as we call it, or as it was called, then sales, marketing, so various different roles with a kind of bias, I guess, towards sales. But I mean, I remember sort of probably 5-6 years into it, starting to kind of question what I was doing, to the point where I felt like I wanted to do something where I could make more of a difference. So again, loved the business. They were fantastic at people development, at kind of bringing you through the business. But I just remember thinking, actually, I feel like I would like to be in a place where I can make more of a difference, both in the type of product I'm selling, and the difference that's making, on a kind of wider level, but also in the difference I can make in just like such a massive machine. So I moved from Mars to Method Ecover. It was just at the time when Ecover had acquired Method, actually. So you've hopefully heard of them, the kind of non-toxic household cleaning company, which was it was a massive move for me. I remember like everybody, my friends and everyone in the business going, what are you doing? But I could swear it was the most fun I've had. It was so good. We had to kind of launch Method in the UK basically, and kind of rebrand Eco for a bit. And I ran our UK business there. So I did that for sort of 4 or 5 years, and we went on this kind of wild growth journey. I think we started, I remember so well, in a sort of a small porter cabin in an airbase in Newbury. And then we kind of worked our way up to really nice offices in Richmond, and kind of grew out the team there. But that was really, really good fun, and it was very purposeful. A boring, sort of slightly begrudged category, but something that we were able to turn on its head into something really exciting. So yeah, did that, and then eventually that sort of sold to SC Johnson. And I went to Lily's Kitchen, the posh pet food business, which again was really great, a kind of purpose-led business, working kind of closely with the founder there, Henrietta, to help grow that business. And then on to Merchant Gourmet after that. So yeah, a kind of always in consumer goods, and more recently kind of working in slightly smaller, more purposeful businesses, but helping them really accelerate growth.
I'm thrilled to introduce Brand Growth Hero's newest partner, Jolson. Jolson is a leading B Corp certified commercial law firm that specialises in guiding the founders of scaling CPG brands. With long-term relationships with clients like Little Moons, Trip, Eat Natural, Bear, Graze and Pulson, Jolson is also famous for advising the Innocent founders in their landmark sale to Coca-Cola. And believe it or not, they still work with the Innocent founders at Jam Jar Investments today. I'm especially impressed by how Jolson sets founders up for long-term success and by their commitment to championing female founders. Recently, I asked Jolson managing partners Phil Hale-Smith and Paul Chappie why it's important that founders consider engaging with a commercial law firm that really understands consumer packaged goods.
Ultimately, we're here to provide legal advice, but actually that legal advice is sort of irrelevant if you're not putting it into context. Thinking about how you make a consumer business, co-packing arrangements, understanding the supply chain, thinking about your sort of cost of goods, all of that is essential to ensure that we're delivering. How do you actually make a business work in the consumer space from a legal point of view, but understanding the marketplace fully? And having worked with consumer brands for the last 25 years, we have a great understanding of the whole space, whether that's manufacturing, the customer, the supply chain, the branding part of it, and all of that requires some legal input as well as understanding how the parts fit together.
At the end of the day, if you don't have someone that's been in the trenches day in, day out for a couple of decades, you're going to be disadvantaged.
Huge thanks to Brand Growth Heroes podcast sponsors, Jolson. Now let's get back to the show. So tell us about Merchant Gourmet. At the point at which you were considering joining, where was the business in terms of, channel, customers, product line, and what made you want to join that business?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was in a good place. It's never a business in distress, and actually, it had been really well looked after and well cared for in the years beforehand. But it had never been run like an FMCG business. So kind of very quickly, the story behind Merchant Gourmet is that it was launched, as I say, about 30 years ago now by Mark and Oliver Leatham, who had a business which was essentially bringing really good quality ingredients from around the world and selling it into high-end food service. So they eventually got to a point where they said, actually, we should put some of these products into retail. It makes perfect sense. So they kind of sold dry ingredients into retail, and the business gently grew from that point onwards, as we said, to about kind of 15 million when I came in. And the remit for me was very much, okay, we want to really now kind of turbocharge growth and get this business really moving because we see the opportunity in it. So it was in a good place. I think it was a small team, and it was also run as part of a bigger organization.
Can I ask just so that I can visualize it, what SKUs were available to us as everyday consumers at that point in time? Because I always think that's a really good way of seeing what it looked like then versus now.
Yeah, not a million miles from what's there now. I think it was probably much more, there was a lot more dried ingredients. So it kind of focused a lot on specialty ingredients. And also there were a number of ready-to-eat products, but they were probably kind of plainer, more simply cooked ones.
Okay.
So a little bit less versatile versus kind of what we've got now, and probably operating in a much more singular, sort of slightly niche category. So the job, which we can come on to, but the job's been very much trying to expand that out.
And actually, I think it's worthwhile calling out what it looks like today, because this is why it's so interesting. So in terms of the range that you have available and the products that have driven the most growth in recent months or the last year, what is happening out there? On which shelves are you guys on? What product formats are you on? What are you focusing on? So then, people can really understand what the change, the from and the to was.
Yeah, I mean, I guess probably what we've done is we've expanded out into areas where we think we've got a kind of a right to play and a right to win, because I think you described as a heritage brand, which is a really good description. We've actually kind of earned the right to be able to go into other categories. So you can now find us, for example, in microwavable rice. More recently, you can find us in beans. We've got a range of kind of meals in minutes. So within the supermarket, we actually play across 6 or 7
Okay.
different subcategories.
And for me, as a woman of a certain age who has particular shopping habits and would have had Merchant Gourmet lentils in the back of her cupboard, right? The interesting
Yeah.
thing for me is now all of a sudden, instead of just having Merchant Gourmet lentils in the back of my cupboard that I might use the odd time when I'm stuck, someone's coming over for lunch and I'm going to do 2 poached eggs and some Merchant Gourmet lentils. Now all of a sudden I can have a quick and healthy plant-based lunch. There's so many different more sides that you offer, or everyday convenient meals. So you're really moving into different occasions and need states and out of that back of cupboard distress moment, right?
Yeah, I'm just so pleased you've said that. I feel like I want to high five you, but I can't.
Go on.
A virtual high, yeah. That is precisely what we've been trying to do, and I think the insight.
Is that a bad thing that your strategy is really obvious, Richard?
I don't know.
I'm totally teasing you.
It probably is.
I'm totally teasing you. No, I'm totally taking the mick. It is so good. It is so obvious because it is the right thing to do. It's like plant-based is on the rise. Plant-based moments are on the rise. Even to the extent that, my kids last night were having barbecued pulled pork, and I was like, oh God, I'll have the rice, but I want another form of protein with it. I don't. So I had some tempeh with it, better nature, of course. And
Yes.
all of those decisions, all of normal people making decisions where they're trying to do swaps, Merchant Gourmet is perfectly positioned to do that. And just before we go any further, I really want people to know which shelves you're on, because our listeners are thinking, where, if I was in a big supermarket where you have the most listings, which shelves can I find you on?
Yeah, so we're in sort of like packaged grocery, I think, is the way that the supermarkets define it, and then often in the kind of global foods aisles. So it varies by supermarket, but basically where all the microwavable rice is will be roughly where you'll find us. So you'll find our rice sitting directly within microwavable rice, and then usually where you've then got sort of canned veg, we will sit around that area as well with most of our range, which are the kind of ready to eat pulses and grains. So they'll be the key shelves we're on.
Okay, and is that where you want to sit?
We're getting deep into category strategy now. I like this. Is it where we want to sit? I think our view is that because this area is growing so much and people are more and more wanting this kind of food, I think the way the shopper need states work and the way people think when they walk down the aisle is slightly different. So we are sort of working a lot with the supermarkets on actually how can we segment things a little bit differently. For example, there's much more of a kind of meals in minutes occasion now. Exactly the point that you've talked about, where someone just wants a really quick lunch because loads of people are now working from home and they just want to microwave something really quickly. That's actually a very different need state and occasion to wanting something that sits on the side of your plate for a really nice dinner, whereas actually they all sit in the same place. So the answer to your question is we don't think we're perfectly positioned where we'd want to be. And there's quite a lot of work to be done in that area, which actually the supermarkets are really jumping on at the moment and doing a really good job of. And I think we'll see a lot, over the course of the next sort of 6 months, I think we'll see a lot more of those changes happening.
So you mentioned there that supermarkets are starting to merchandise products in a new way that represents changing shopper need states and kind of consumption occasions. Is that because of the move towards more plant-based options during the week, or what is that? And how do you see that changing over time?
Yeah, good question. I think it's less I think it's less plant-based. I think it's more what the insight's been, and it's a kind of obvious comment, but both post-COVID, people are working at home on average 2 days a week, which is way more, and people want quick, healthy lunches. So that's been quite an interesting insight. But when I say quick, it kind of needs to be quick, as in a couple of minutes to prepare. Because as we all know, you end up on back-to-back Zooms, and then you end up rushing to the fridge, and you haven't got time, etc., etc. So trying to find something that is inverted commas healthy, and that could be plant-based because that is healthy, but also kind of simple ingredients, minimally processed, but tasty.
Okay. So you guys aren't necessarily growing or riding the wave of plant-based. You guys are riding the wave of convenient, healthier lunch choices.
Yes. So this is a really good question. You've hit on the. So yes, we're plant-based, and we're sort of proud to be plant-based, but that isn't sort of the cornerstone of who we are as a brand. I think it's a by the way. So who we are as a brand are exactly as you say, convenient, plant-based, healthy, minimally processed food. That is also plant-based, and there's a health element to plant-based. But really, like, our massive cornerstone is taste and convenience. They're the things that we really focus on. Yeah.
Okay, this is amazing. So can I ask a question? Did you have a moment in time in the last 4 years where you had to do like a deep dive into, should we focus on being plant-based and vegan, and should that be part of our loud and proud positioning? And you decided, no, we're not going to, that's going to be a by the way.
Oh, we went all the way down that line, Fiona. We like, so when I started, we were like, well, I was sort of like, well, hold on, wait, everything we do is basically plant-based. So we, that should be our thing. We should just be a plant-based. And as you then start to kind of understand why people really, why do people buy the product? It's not because it's plant-based, it's because it tastes really good, it's convenient, all the stuff that we know. And so we did not, I wouldn't say a U-turn, I'd say a pivot towards actually really doubling down our messaging and talking about what consumers really buy us for and what they want. But when I say we went in on it, I mean we changed the packaging at the beginning to say plant-based simplicity. So we really did sort of push that quite hard. As it was a trend and as it was a thing, to be honest. And it's just been it's one of the many learnings that I've kind of had as I've gone through, which is, try not to ride the waves of the fads, but just actually understand why your consumer's buying you, and also what's the kind of unmet consumer need, right? Because the unmet consumer needs, that there's an enduring trend, yes, behind people eating less meat, but actually, at the moment, everyone's just extremely busy and has a huge amount of choice. So creating something that's hyper convenient and tastes incredible, it is actually solving the need much more than a plethora of sort of plant-based stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great. The only reason I'm asking the question with a smile is because I've been working with so many brands, particularly as well, I'm NED at Better Nature, and we all go through this, and we all wonder, how much should you center on that, and how big is the market versus a mass market approach where it's just about healthiness, and plant-based kind of underpins that healthiness, or is one of the elements that underpins the healthiness. And it is such a head wreck. And I think it's really nice for listeners out there who are probably going through the same thing. What do we focus our positioning on? Because we've got so many benefits, so many advantages to our product. What do we knuckle down on? And what's the heart of our brand? And it's okay. Even Richard Peake, who's been in this business and was brought up in Mars and all of these big businesses, you still have a head wrangle over it for 18 months or whatever, and then you do an evolution pivot, and that's okay, right? It's okay. And I think, because it isn't bloody easy, is it? Brand positioning is one of the most difficult things to do. And often in my career anyway, it has only been the moment where I've said to myself, hang on a second, although that all makes perfect sense, what size is that market? If we position in that way, what size is the market? What size is the portion of the market we're playing in? And if it's the purely plant-based or purely vegan, it's going to be 8% of people who are vegetarian or 5% of people who are vegan. And then, whereas if it's, no, you can eat us as a side with meat, or you can eat us as your plant-based option during the week, well, it's up towards the 50% of the UK adults.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think in summary, I think the journey we sort of went through is like what you sort of start off with, what's the enduring trend, and basically our ancestors wanted to eat good quality food that's grown from the ground, and minimally processed. So that, like, big tick there. But then it's kind of like back to what I said, which is, well, what problem are we actually solving? Because there's lots of people that can do that better than we can. So uniquely, what problem are we solving? Well, probably convenience and taste, actually. That's what we can do a really, really good job of. And then to the point that you made, how do we then make that culturally relevant for people? So it becomes kind of less of a, to your point, a heritage brand, but also actually something that's really super relevant. I mean, January, it's the 6th of January. January is a lovely example of that, where people are eating out way less, but they still want really good food moments. People probably are cutting back on their meat consumption. They want affordable treats. That, like, there's this kind of perfect culturally relevant thing where it's like, actually, we can bring you everyday gourmet, as we call it, which is kind of our big strap line. And it's, you get to that one strap line through, as you say, months/years of kind of a bit of scar tissue and a bit of learning.
That's brilliant. Excuse me. That's brilliant, because earlier when I was describing the kind of lunch moment that I was trying to create for a friend calling in for lunch midweek, it was that everyday gourmet moment. That's exactly what it was. Now, I wouldn't use that if I'm thinking to myself, I'm looking in my cupboard and I need something everyday gourmet. But I would have said, it's Caroline, she's a little bit older than me. She's kind of my adopted mum here on the Isle of Man. I don't want to just serve her, I don't know, what I'd have on my own. I want to make a little bit of an effort. And I think she'd like, the Merchant Gourmet lentils with some poached eggs. And that's exactly it, everyday gourmet. Okay, so I know we're digressing loads into positioning and but that's really important, because it's about where can you play better and win than any alternatives. So one of the things, when I was looking at Merchant Gourmet earlier today, I was really interested that your core pillars in terms of products are lentils, rice, chestnuts and mushrooms. Is that right? And
yeah.
I got all of them except for the chestnuts bit. Tell me why chestnuts are still in there, or are in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, chestnuts will sort of, going all the way back, I think the two big signature products for Merchant Gourmet were chestnuts and poi lentils. And chestnuts have always been a staple part of what Merchant Gourmet's done. It's sort of very simple, ready to eat product. And as you can imagine, it's heavily centered towards Christmas. So it's like super seasonal. The reason I particularly like chestnuts, as opposed to, I think they taste amazing and they always remind me of Christmas, from a brand point of view, is that they're also a good, so we'd call it like recruiter into the brand. So a lot of people who don't necessarily eat our products will eat chestnuts over Christmas. So how can we then kind of use that to recruit and drive more people into the brand throughout the rest of the season? Yeah.
Okay, so it has a role in terms of recruitment. That's really interesting. I wasn't expecting that. I just thought you were keeping it because it's part of the brand's DNA and heritage, and which I understand. Of course, you're not going to get rid of something that's part of the brand DNA, but it actually works in terms of recruitment. And do you have data that says that?
Yeah, because we see we see who buys it, and then we see the household penetration of it, which is actually really high, because although it's bought with a very low frequency, like once or twice a year max, it's quite deep when people do it, because most people have chestnuts over Christmas, like with their sprouts or whatever, but they don't really know. Not that many people could be like, oh, can you just get the Merchant Gourmet chestnuts out of it? They don't know it's Merchant Gourmet. They just know they're buying that kind of pouch of chestnuts. So we've tried to use it a bit within our marketing to kind of roll into the rest of the range. Not spectacularly well, to be honest, but it definitely does have a role. all of that said, to your point, you are right. We're not sort of planning a huge pipeline of 10 new chestnut products because that's not necessarily where we see all the growth coming from.
Although, do you know what a great product would be?
Go on.
And it would be going into a category that doesn't make much sense, I don't think, really, for you. But a chestnut flour bread mix.
Yes, chestnut flour is an interesting one. Yeah, it's
because lots of people I know who are into alternative eating, or gluten-free, or trying to eat more healthily, use chestnut flour to make cakes or bread.
Yeah, that's going on to our head of innovation is going to be delighted when I come off this call. I've got another one for you. Well, we've already got 50 things. No, there's another one.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so look, let's talk about team then. So when you arrived into Merchant Gourmet, how many people were there? And then what roles did you recruit for? So you're thinking to yourself, what? This is a 15 million quid business. I think I can double it. Were you thinking that?
That was the sort of... yes, the plan that we gave ourselves, as you always do. It's like, right, we're going to go and double it, and what needs to be true, etc., etc. So yeah, that's very much was the intention.
So what did you think? What did you know you needed to do in order to double the business in terms of team, role, structure, products, markets? Talk us through all of that thinking.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased you mentioned team and people because that is always, I mean, for me, definitely that's always the start point. And I'm a really firm believer that if you bring in talented people, unite them behind a purpose that they genuinely in an elevated way believe in, and you put them in a culture that they love being a part of, you will outperform. Like everything else plays second fiddle to that. And I'm a really big believer in that. So that was where and continues to be where all the focus has gone. And I'm conscious that's quite a trite comment because every business you go into has their kind of whatever values or principles, and people's always first. But I think there is a difference between having a genuine belief in people and the importance of culture and kind of playing it lip service.
Well, let's talk about that then. So what does that mean in your business?
So in our business, what it means is that people come to work and are given the ability just to show up as themselves. So it's tricky, and I'm always a bit careful when I talk about culture because, I remember at Mars, and this isn't, Mars was fantastic, but they kind of had these are our 5 principles, this is how you'll be, this is the person that you will show up and become. But in a way, that's almost, it kind of feels like a bit of a fallacy because we always know that when we go to work, if we just show up as ourselves, then we become the best version of ourselves. And so if you kind of pre-prescribe how you want somebody to be, it's a bit tricky. So we genuinely just try and celebrate everybody's individual skills, and don't try and be too fixed in how we need to be.
What about behaviors though? Sorry. What about behaviors? Do you prescribe or do you suggest the types of behaviors that you want to see in Merchant Gourmet?
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about kind of thinking big, about the ability just to try things, giving people room to kind of make mistakes, learn and move forward quickly. Because a lot of the success we've had is that we have just tried things and said, actually, look, let's just iterate. So I think by having that as a kind of asterisk or a side point in the way you speak to people, and then proving it out in the way you behave by kind of saying, doesn't matter, that's gone wrong, like what hasn't worked, let's just kind of use that to iterate and learn. It works really well. It's not really empowerment so much. I mean, people are empowered, but it's much more just giving people the ability to get things wrong. So I think that's one. And I think the other one is, the leadership and the management style is much more of what I call a kind of it's like servant leadership. It's kind of like, your job or my job is just to kind of clear a path and just let really talented people sprint through it. Just move everything out of the way, show them kind of roughly where we want to get to, and just let people go. And you can get so much more out of people. It's a bit like being a parent. I don't know. I need to stop doing analogies. Yeah, I do too many analogies. I always get told this, Fiona.
I don't mind. I don't mind you doing analogies, and I'm sure the listeners won't. So go for it.
All right. Well, you've got kids as well, haven't you? So it's like You know, the parent thing where it's sort of like you can only really get so far telling your kids what to do and what not to do, because as soon as they get into the real world, that person isn't there. Um, but really, and God, it's difficult to do. But I guess your sort of role, I think your role as a parent is just to give your kids all the conditions to just to go and let them fly. Like, love, security, belief, guidance, like all those great things, create that really strong platform that's kind of sitting there underneath it so that they can genuinely just go and be great. And I think if you try and roll that stylistically forward into the work environment, it can work really well. I didn't really expect to be talking this deeply about culture, to be honest. But anyway, yeah, I think that's a sort of long answer to your question on culture and people. And I think that, yeah, the team, because the team are kind of given that belief, they pay it back in spades, and people actually, hopefully, if you ask the team, are they enjoying it and are they loving the mission they're on, they will say yes.
And are you ever office based? Are you home based? How does it work?
Yeah, we probably similar to most businesses. We're kind of hybrid, really. So yeah, everyone tends to come into the office a couple of days a week, and then they've got a choice outside of that which days they come in. They tend to come in teams on the days outside of the ones when we all come in.
Okay, nice. And how big is the business now in terms of people?
It's still not huge. We're up to about 22, 23 of us now.
Okay. So question. So when you came in and you decided, right, well, we're going to drive growth, what were the first roles you needed to hire for? Because I think that's a question that founders who are scaling their businesses often think, where do I need to focus on putting heads, bums in seats to make growth happen?
Yeah, I mean, obvious answer, but I think sales. I was listening to the really good pod that you did with Ben, actually, from Tony's, and I think he was saying that half the team are in sales, which doesn't surprise me on their growth journey. I think that, getting really good salespeople in is clearly very critical.
Did you see? Sorry, I know I keep interrupting. I'm sorry. I'm terrible for that.
No, go for it.
Did you see yesterday? Levi Levenfitch of Perfect TED posted that they have 7 sales roles open right now for recruitment. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, I know. I did. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of so obvious, isn't it? It's like, well, actually, if you believe you've got a really good product that's sticky and people try it and they like it and they buy it again, it's a case of, well, get it distributed in as many places as you can, and then make people aware of it. So sales is sort of the first and most critical part of that equation. So that was definitely one. And I think the other one is sort of patching together a really strong senior leadership team that kind of sit alongside me to kind of really help me and be like genuine thought partners and sort of provoke and bounce things around and I guess kind of challenge thinking. So like they were the ones which, that's not a quick thing to hire for, but it's definitely where the focus went.
Okay, and so let's talk a little bit about NPD, because that seems to be driving a lot of growth, or is it, has export been driving a lot of the growth before we dive into NPD?
I think export more latterly is driving the growth. I think NPD's been a significant growth driver for us across the last sort of 4 years. Yeah.
Okay, so talk to us about how you do NPD in your business, because I can see just how much you've done over the last 4 years, and I know how difficult it is to get NPD right in terms of the internal processes to make sure that you have more hits than loses, or hits than, what would that be? Hits than
misses.
Misses, thank you. Monday morning brain.
I know the feeling. I mean, NPD, that's the most critical point for me. It's impossible to get right. And I think if you actually have that in your head at the beginning of all of your NPD efforts, it's not a bad discipline, because it's like anything. If you could get it right first time, then everyone would be creating unicorns left, right and center. So I think knowing that, I mean, I sometimes say, and I sort of say to other friends or whoever who's sort of starting out in the industry, the product you start with is not going to be the iteration of the product that you end with. So I think you can sometimes get a bit bogged down in trying to do all the insights and kind of paralyze yourself with analysis rather than just launch things that you're happy with and you believe is playing in the right white space and you've got a right to win in. But actually, you know that you're going to kind of test and learn a little bit. So that's definitely been our approach with MPD. I'll give you I'll give you an example. We launched probably about 3 years ago something which we call plant jars, which we were so proud of. It was like the products were amazing. They were kind of these really good quality lentil bologneses, chilies, but they were in these lovely jars, and we sourced the jars from I don't know where. They were like really thick, deep jars. We got these lids. We had the lids designed by an artist. It was like a beautiful thing, and we said this is gonna be incredible, and it absolutely tanked. Like it just didn't
so
sell.
why? Let's talk about that, because I've been telling Bold Bean for ages to get beautiful jars with artist collaboration lids. So why did it tank?
Well, I think honestly, and this isn't a comment to Bold Bean. I think they're doing amazing stuff, but I think in our case, if you really look back and think about it, we were solving zero consumer unmet needs. Like no one was sitting at home going, "Do you know what I really need? I just need a lentil bolognese in an incredible jar with a beautiful lid." Like it's not. There's no. You're not solving any kind of unmet problem there. And because they were in a fairly unrecognizable format and an expensive format, they were also expensive.
So if you put the same product into one of your pouches, would it not have tanked?
Well, that's exactly what we've done. So, and this is the iteration point, right? So we kind of launched it hasn't worked. We've now, over time, kind of reincarnated it into what we call Meals in Minutes, which is in a pouch, very understandable, super clear what it is, really good price point, highly accessible.
Which is like what my friend Shane at Feed does.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we've got exactly that.
I was a bit worried for Bold Bean and for Feed when I saw that you were moving into Meals in Minutes in pouches and into beans in pouches. And I thought I know, but both of them probably would say competition is a good thing because it means there's going to be more category activity, there's going to be more space given to the category, more choice for consumers, more consumers coming in. Is that the way to look at it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, and I'm not just saying that, Yeah. So we've launched a range of beans as well, because for all the same reasons that we know that they're really, really great products. But I mean, so many times in my career, I've sort of gone into a new space, and people have been like, "Oh no, that's really crowded. It's going to be a problem." But the answer is, if you go in, you do a good job of it, and open up the category and create healthy competition, it's just a positive thing. So yeah, I definitely don't kind of fear that in any way.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to tasting those products, by the way. Wink, wink.
Oh yes, we'll have those sent over to you immediately. Yes. We do a 5-bean medley, which is really good. It's
Okay.
that one particularly, and because we do them in pouches, they're not in any sort of stock or brine, so we can season them as well. So they're in kind of a really nice Italian extra virgin olive oil with some sea salt. So the idea is you can just rip them and just pour them straight away.
And that's nice too for the category because it's answering a different consumer need state to the Bold Beans, which is very much an ingredient for scratch cooking. Yes, you can eat them out of a jar with a spoon like Amelia and her team do, and I do, but it's very much, I'm going to create, whereas with yours, I can imagine it also being straight into a bowl and being a side on the dinner table.
Yeah, exactly. You can heat it in the pouch. You can just pour it quickly onto a salad, and it's all ready to go. So yeah, you're right. It's a slightly different needs and different occasion. So hopefully, it's adding something to the category. I don't know, with like where you get beans in a jar or a tin, you can use that stock as well. So it's not like you're pouring it away. So it's just a different. Proposition.
Okay, so talk to us then about export. How big has export been in terms of your growth, or how big will it be?
Yeah, I mean, export's funny. So if you think about all the trends that have made us successful in the UK, so people eating less meat, people wanting less processed foods, global flavors, etc., none of those are specific to the UK. They're kind of global mega trends. So you kind of look and say, well, why are we not doing export? Is it, it's either because we're concerned about the complexity or we have a fear of failure, both of which aren't really kind of acceptable answers to not doing it. So the approach with export has, it's similar to what we've talked about. It's been, you just have to kind of go for it and then kind of learn a bit as you go.
Funny, I always think export is like the easy win. When I go into business, export's one of the first things I look at, because I find export really easy. And because I suppose I've always done it, because living in Ireland,
Yeah.
or whatever, my first major big career breakthrough was running Gourmet France, and that was, pretty much having to sell chilled English desserts to the French across every single retailer, every single region. So once you've done that, you kind of feel like anything else is pretty easy. And I find that really interesting that you're saying that export feels, or for some UK companies, that it feels almost like there was a barrier up to it. There was a barrier, was there?
Yeah, I think, honestly, it's just the kind of, it's the unknown, because it's not your home market necessarily, but also, there's a lot of legislation, compliance, packaging changes, tariffs. It's not straightforward. And I guess, I would argue that up into a certain size, it's maybe not the best thing to go after it. I mean, if you feel like there's lots of fertile ground in your home territory, then there is a lot of complexity to export, and it's a slow burn. I mean, in my experience, it's a slow burn. But I guess kind of the way we approached it is in the same way as like innovation. It's kind of like, well, let's just do all the research to say where do we think the best place to launch is, and then do it in a localized regional way.
Exactly.
And learn, see what works, see what doesn't, get a few things wrong, and then kind of roll out from there. And that's very much been the approach. And definitely, our first launch was in Monoprix in France, about kind of 18 months ago. And I could write a very long list of all the things we got wrong when we tried to do that, from kind of packaging to artwork to logistics to a million different other things. But as we've learned over time, each time we do a new retailer or a new territory, it gets slightly easier. So yeah, but I think as you say, I think you've probably got more experience that makes it less daunting.
Yeah, I think it's part of your neural network. Once you've launched a product in a country and all of the things that need to change and need to be addressed, then the next time, whether it's China or Japan, you still have in your head, well, I know that potentially the barcode needs to this, or the case size or the pallet size, or there needs to be on a different type of pallet, or there's so many different things that I wouldn't have known to think about unless I'd done what I have done. I think one of the key things when I'm building, when we're looking at this in the Brand Growth Heroes Mini MBA, we have a whole section on how to select markets. And one of the things that we do is not only, looking at the consumer insight and where, say, the retail environment is favorable to us and where there's a gap, but also, where our shelf life will work, but also what do we need from a partner in order to win in that market? And is that partner available? Because you can have the right product and you can have the right opportunity in a marketplace, but if there isn't someone, if you're not going to do it yourself, so you can do it yourself, you can set up an entity in that market like we did with Goo and like Innocent did in Innocent France. But if you're not able to do that, then there really needs to be someone in that market who can make it happen. So I think that's another interesting criteria or variable when you're making your matrix, if it's France, Germany, Belgium, which retailer is the premium retailer? Is there a gap on shelf, and is there a partner? And does it work from a pricing perspective? Are there enough consumers or shoppers who are going to make it worthwhile? And is there a partner who can deliver this? And what would they need to deliver? I just think that it's worth saying that as well.
Yeah, so the importance of finding a really good, basically really exceptionally good distribution partners.
Yeah, Yeah, and
Yeah.
distribution partner is a broad term, because some people would think distribution partner means, or people mightn't know that distribution partner can be wheels, or it can be wheels plus sales and marketing, and it can be very much we do all the sales and marketing and you've no role in it whatsoever, or it can be wheels plus account management, but we do all of the brand. I mean, you know all this. I'm just really talking to the listeners out there. But we want to be in all the meetings. I'm sure you guys went over to all the Monoprix brand meetings, right, or the negotiations.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Did you use a distributor in France to support that launch, or or did you do it directly?
We actually did it directly for the same reasons that we wanted to sort of own that brand message, and it was really important to us.
Yeah.
And as we've scaled out, we're starting to work with partners.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that, like everything you said, I sort of, with hindsight, totally agree with. Another reason why it would have been helpful if we'd have met earlier, Fiona, I think it saved me a lot of headaches. Yeah.
Do you know, it's funny that I was talking to Jolson, actually, or one of the partners of the podcast and of the mini MBA, and they were asking me why I built the Brand Growth Heroes mini MBA. And it was because it really bothers me. Like when I heard you say that about export earlier, I just thought, or when you said, that you'd worked at Monoprix and you can think of all the things that went wrong. I think we've all got so much collective knowledge and experience and understanding of, but yet each company goes and does the same thing over. Like each company will go and do it and make the same mistakes. And it just wrecks my head, because I'm like, we should all know that. There should be like one central place where we all can plug into, so that we're not all making the same mistakes, because the hours and the stress and the money that we're all spending learning the same thing. So I think that's what drove me to build the mini MBA, to take everything from, where do we want to go in 10 years to how are we going to get there, and how are we going to do it better than everybody else, with which team, which resources, which partners, and then what does that look like bottom up? Because I was sick and tired of all the companies I was helping learning it all separately,
It's so true, isn't it? And the thing is, I always think, I guess it's like anything really in life, but the more I sort of spend in the industry, the more I just think, no one's got a really clever answer to anything. There tends to just be a way, like a best practice way of doing things.
Yeah.
And you're right, if you could sort of codify all of that and just have it as a vehicle for people just to access, it would make life so much easier.
It would. So what happens next for Merchant Gourmet? You got to 30 million. Where are you going to next?
I mean, export continues to be a really big play for us, because obviously it's relatively infinite, the opportunity there for us. So now we've sort of started to get the hang of it. I think that's going to be a really important one for us. And then secondly, more innovation. I guess there's lots of big, exciting, addressable categories where we feel we can come in and actually genuinely create something that's different and interesting, and giving people an opportunity to continue to, experience really good quality food, but in a way that's healthy. So yeah, I think we've definitely got big plans, which I think is really important to have.
Well, I look forward to the business being at 100 million, which I'm sure it will be. No, I genuinely mean it. It's a heritage brand. It makes sense in so many different languages. You really own that space. I didn't ask you whether you have your own manufacturing or whether you co-manufacture.
We co-manufacture.
You co-manufacture. But, you obviously are staying true to the way in which you produce. Is it sous vide? Is that what it is?
Retorted. Yeah.
Retort.
Yeah.
And, kind of doing that across lots of different categories and formats with the same ingredients. It's really tight. It's a really tight model. I can't see why that won't work across the entire world. And I wish you the very, very best of luck getting it to that 100 million. Shall we get back together when you get the business to 60 million? So you'll have doubled it again.
Yes, that sounds good. I think I'll be even older and have even more grey hairs by that point. But yeah, I very much look forward to that. And thanks for the conversation as well. I really appreciate it. It's been great to get your sort of inputs as somebody who is a bit of a powerhouse in the industry too.
Well, look, let's sit down for coffee anytime. And I really look forward to having a taste of those beans and meals in minutes. And hopefully they'll be available on the Isle of Man soon.
Yes, fingers crossed. Yes, and a coffee sounds good. I feel like I've written down about 15 different questions I already want to ask you.
Oh, good. Do you know actually who stocks you on the Isle of Man? There's a fabulous business called Robinson's, who's a wholesaler.
Okay.
And they've got like all the kind of independent boutique-y food. So Robinson's, any of your new stuff should go through them because there's a big market for it. Well, there's a nice little hub for your products here.
Perfect. Noted already. Thank you.
All right, Richard, thanks so much for your time. Lovely to see you.
Thanks so much. All right,
Bye.
great to speak.
Bye.
Bye.